Hello, Puget Sound community. This is Jake Nelko from Career and Employment Services. Today, as part of our Ask a Logger series, we are joined by Nasser Kyobe, a communications alumnus from the class of 2013. Nasser serves as executive producer for the Seahawks Radio Network, and he has also served in marketing, promotions, and broadcasting roles for the Seattle Storm, Seattle Mariners, and Houston Astros, as well as 710 ESPN Radio in Seattle. So thanks for joining us today, Nasser.
Yeah, no problem. I'm always happy to be back and help out fellow alums or students at Puget Sound. Happy to be here.
Great. And thanks to those that are joining us in person or who are watching this video. The first 15 to 20 minutes of our call will be dedicated to an interview with Nasser that I'll conduct with a few of my questions, at which point I'll open the floor to questions from those in attendance. So let's just jump right into it. Nasser, could you start by describing your job and your employer?
Yeah, so I work for the Seattle Seahawks in the NFL. I'm an executive producer for the Seahawks Radio Network. And in a nutshell, I produce game day radio. So I produce our 3-hour pregame show, our 3-hour postgame show, as well as halftime on game day. I'm in charge of producing several other programs that air during the week on 710 ESPN Seattle, which is our flagship station. So one of them is called The Huddle, which is a player-driven show where you get a couple of player interviews, maybe talk to some coaches, other broadcasters, kind of a preview for that weekend's game, as well as another show called Hawks Live, where it's usually on location and a player comes down and it's another interview and just more prep for the game. So it's just programming to get our fans ready for game day. And that's what I do in terms of producing. Outside of that, I manage our radio network. We have about 68 radio affiliates throughout the region, from Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, all the way down to Hawaii. So I kind of manage that network. So those fans can listen to our games. I also work with the public relations staff. We're kind of all in one unit. So I help coordinate interviews, not just for the shows that I produce, but other media outlets, whether it's radio, TV, or written. I produce some other training camp programming. So I kind of wear a lot of different hats, but that's mainly what I do. I'm in charge of our radio network and kind of help messaging on that side of things.
Cool. Thanks for that overview. And I mentioned before our time that I'm particularly interested in hearing your story because this is a direction that I thought I was going to go in when I was in college, and I'll use that as a point to say things change, and you learn about different options, and you end up going all kinds of different directions. So hopefully, people that are watching today will learn and get excited about your path and maybe think about going that direction. I'm also a huge sports fan, so I'm excited to hear more about what goes on behind the scenes and stuff like that. So I saw a little bit on your LinkedIn. People can see that, but why don't you tell me a bit about how you got into this line of work and maybe a little bit about your pathway from job one until now?
Yeah, we were talking about it earlier. There's in sports, there's never just one path. It's really interesting in that sense that a lot of people who are in my position or in other departments within our organization took a lot of different paths to get there. For me, I knew when I was at Puget Sound that I knew I wanted to work in sports. So that's one thing I knew. Even like coming out of high school, I knew I wanted to work in sports. I had no clue what I wanted to actually do. Initially, I thought I wanted to be an on-air talent. I wanted to be on SportsCenter. I wanted to do all that stuff. I was a huge fan of Stuart Scott growing up. That's who I wanted to be. And then at Puget Sound, while I was playing football there, I was trying to get into media. So I was trying to find any internship that I could get. So I hit up all the TV stations, all the radio stations in town, and I ended up getting an internship at Cairo Radio, which is in the same building as 710 ESPN Seattle, on the news side. And that was kind of my first getting my toe wet in this industry at all. And at that point, I knew nothing. I think I was getting ready to go into my senior year. So that summer, I was driving down to Seattle every day and just trying to learn from everyone in that building. And it's crazy how one internship can kind of change your trajectory of where you're going, because it's all about getting your foot in the door. And once I was able to do that, able to springboard to me, I had a good internship experience. I conducted myself well. I was able to get another internship the second semester of my senior year at 710 ESPN Seattle, which is in the sports side, which is really what I wanted. And at that point, I had a little bit of knowledge. of kind of how the radio part works. And then I worked my tail off in that internship. And then about a month later, I got hired on as an on-call board operator. So people controlling everything that you hear, all the sounds and stuff like that. So it was a grind at first because being on call, I was working overnights. I was working 6 a.m. to 2 on Saturday and Sundays. I was working all kinds of crazy shifts for all 3 stations in the building. And while I was there was another job with the Mariners. Both were part-time at the time. That was, okay, you can get into the marketing. It's kind of they call them navigators as part of their promotions team that do a lot of events you see on the field and things throughout the ballpark. They're kind of ambassadors for the club. And through some of the connections that I made at 710 ESPN, it helped me get an opportunity with the Mariners, and things just kind of continued to go from there. So I was working for the Mariners and 710 ESPN at the same time, both on part-time basis. I worked into a role where I had a shift on 710 every morning. I was doing Sports Center updates. I was doing a little bit on air. I was board opping. I was filling, producing. And then in the evenings, I was driving over to Safeco Field at the time and getting my feet wet with the marketing department. And I learned so much in those 3 years of doing that, of going back and forth. And in that, I was working for the Storm as well. So it just kind of, all those experiences kind of always just led to the next thing. And the next thing for me after the Mariners happened to be the Houston Astros. Like, it was an opportunity to take a next step in my career. And because of everything that I had done, kind of got me ready for that moment. I moved to Houston, and that was a crazy whirlwind of 6 months, and it was a great time down there. And then an opportunity with the Seahawks opened up, and I ended up coming back home. But long story short, in terms of like the journey, it's really all about getting your foot in the door and taking advantage of the people that you know. And when you're around people in front offices or radio stations or whatever, is just absorbing every possible thing you can and talking to people and picking people's brains and learning and conducting yourself in a professional way that people want to recommend you for stuff. So like, things happen because of the work you put in and taking advantage of those opportunities. So like, I know a lot of people that work for the Seahawks, for example, they don't necessarily jump all around and take that path. Some people are interns for us and they get hired on, and then that's history. Other people come from all across the country and they had a million internships and they did this and that. So there's not really a path. Some people go back to grad school. That's great for some people. Some people get a management degree or whatever it is. So there's not one path, but it's really just about getting your feet wet and just working your tail off and going. So long story short, it was kind of a wild ride to get here, but all the work and grinding paid off, because unfortunately, when you first get into this industry, you're not going to make a lot of money. You're not. So you're going to have to work lots of jobs. And that's why I was looking for 710, the Mariners, the Storm. I was coaching high school football. At one point, I was selling shoes at Champ Sports just to make things work. But once you put in the work and you grind, it kind of opens up doors down the road.
Well, thanks for that. Yeah, I know that's pretty consistent with some other stories I've heard in the field. Looks like your first full-time role where you were paid, not working a second job, was that with the Astros then? Like, yeah. About almost 3 years after graduation? Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Yeah, just for timing, wanted to clarify that. Great. So my next question, what advice, and answer this in the sense of if things were kind of normal, I guess we'll mm-hmm. address how things aren't normal in a second, but what advice do you have for current, and you just touched on some of this, what advice do you have for current students or recent graduates who are trying to take their first step into your line of work?
Yeah, I think for starters, like I said, the easiest way is to work as hard as you can to get an internship while you're still in college. So like for kids that are still in college, that's the easiest way to kind of get started, because you're not exactly sure what you want to do yet, and it's easier. You can do stuff for college credit, or they'll pay you. It kind of depends on where you're at and where the laws are there. But it starts there. But for anyone else, it's just, my number one thing is, the worst thing anyone can say to you is no, and that's not going to stop you. So like, always shoot your shot. I think the thing about the sports industry, it's incredibly, incredibly, incredibly competitive. There's so many people hunting for the same jobs because everyone wants to work in sports, right? So like my advice is to is to reach out, is to try to, if you can set up an informational interview, I would email tons of people just to pick. It's like, hey, I'm a recent graduate of University of Peterstown, whether it's reaching out to the Rainiers or, you know, the Rain or whatever it is, or even someone of the Mariners. It's just trying to learn from other people, and just like we're talking about here. How did you get here, and what are the steps you did to get there, and like what's a good job to break into it. Because the other thing is too is a lot of times it's good to, you might, when you first break into sports, you might get a job that's not where you want to be 5, 10, 15 years down the road, obviously, right? It might not be you might get a job and it's in sales, or you might get a job and it's in facilities, or it might be something different that's not necessarily where you want to end up. But sometimes just getting in the door is the next best thing. And then while you're there, take advantage of it. Talk to as many people as you can. And the advice that some of my mentors had for me, Kevin Martinez, who's a senior VP of marketing and communications for the Mariners. I had lots of talks with him and that whole department. And one of the advice he told me, 6, 7 years ago, whenever I first started working there, was like, no one who works around you should not know what you want to do. Like if they see you like, oh, there's Nasser over there, I know he really wants to get into marketing, whether I'm doing that or not. But it's important for everyone to know that you're driven and that you have ambitions to go somewhere. Because if you make a good impression, when something opens up 5, 6 months ago, they'd be like, oh, I got a good impression from Nasser or Jake or whatever. And then they'd be like, well, I know he's really interested in this field, and that might help push you there to get you off of that stack of 700 resumes in front of the people they're actually doing the hiring. So I think, like I said, the worst anyone can say is no. So reach out, be active, and honestly have some resilience and be ready to face some adversity, because that word no, you're going to hear it over and over and over again. The amount of times that I've heard no before I heard a yes is unbelievable. I can't tell you how many jobs I applied for, how many people I talked to, how many rounds of interviews I went through and I didn't get the job and I heard no, no, no. But it's about just being resilient and fighting through adversity and being like, okay, that's the worst someone can say to me. I'm going to keep trying and keep grinding and doing your best to get your foot in the door and because once you just stick that toe in the door, the opportunities are endless, and you just got to make it happen.
That's great advice. I appreciate that your field is pretty open about wanting to help people to get to that next point, or to know what people are shooting for, because I would give that same advice to people in all fields. Mm-hmm. But that it's not as kosher for people to want to search for the next thing in other fields. So it's interesting that is in your field. It's just much more appropriate and encouraged. My next question, obviously for anyone that's a sports fan, maybe for anyone that's alive right now, but especially sports fans, know that things are weird. COVID has thrown a lot of things off. A lot of us are counting down the days till our favorite sports come back. But in terms of hiring in your field, as of right now, and from your perspective, how are you seeing hiring changing in the amount of opportunities and how people are landing them?
For me, the team that I work on has been pretty consistent. The team has been the amount of people. We have a really close knit crew that we've worked together for several years now, and yeah, it's weird. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. Quarantine has been different for everybody. And I think in our field, things are still moving. We're still going to have interns. How that's going to look, I'm not exactly sure. But I think everyone out there is doing their best to try to maintain as much normalcy as they can, and work as hard. And I can't speak specifically to all hiring practices for HR or anything on behalf of the Seahawks, but in my world, it hasn't changed a ton. It's the difference would be for people, whatever organization is this form. Like typically, this would be stage 1 or 2 of an interview process. You fill it out, maybe you have a phone call, then you have maybe Zoom or Teams or Skype or whatever, and then you get to have the in-person thing. So I think that's the biggest difference throughout any industry is going to be the portion of, instead of getting that last in-person interaction. And it's a lot like people like to get in front of people and shake their hand, which we're not doing now, and really kind of show their personality. And sometimes it's harder to come off in this setting. But I think that's the biggest difference. And then I think people who are looking to get jobs and stuff just kind of have to reinvent and try to show their true selves in this platform. And I think as this has gone on for 100 days, I think people have kind of figured that out, and it's less. Early on, it was awkward. It was really awkward. You have 14 people on the screen. You're kind of figuring stuff out. But I think now people are getting more comfortable in that realm. I think if you can do that, that'll be the biggest difference for me. I think is just getting there and then figuring out what happens when hopefully we get back to some normalcy.
Cool. That's helpful. Yeah, the students, like everyone, have gone through a crash course in learning how to do things on video. So helpful to know that's a skill, that's going to be valued as they move forward. I've got a couple of questions harkening back to your days as a student. So my first one is, what's one thing that you did, what's one thing that you wish you had done as an undergrad to prepare for life after graduation that you did not do, or that you wish you had done sooner?
I think, knowing I wanted to work in sports, I was fortunate enough to have my work study job be in the athletic office, which is helpful. Worked under Robin Hamilton, who's no longer with the school, but has a long legacy of doing great things there. Worked under Amy Hackett. And so it was beneficial to have those people in place, especially early on when I had no clue, because they've been around for a while. They know people, and it was helpful to, get in touch with certain people, knowing that I wanted to work in sports. But I think what I would have done is I didn't really go hard at pursuing this until like my junior year of college. Like, I knew that's what I wanted to do. And I think I made some excuses because I was playing football. So like my time was a lot less available. But I think especially in the summers, I would have started my freshman year, and I would have done more things, because just because there isn't an avenue that's already in place, you can make things happen. Like, if knowing what I know now, when I was a freshman, I would have been working at athletic office. I would have been like, hey, well, maybe I should create my own podcast talking about the games on campus that I'm working, or maybe I should, whether I was getting paid for it or not, probably not, but just I should start my own thing. I can start practicing, and I can start learning, and I think I would have just been more, I did a lot better job of that as I got older, and I really want to kind of start once I graduated, but I think I would have started earlier. And again, just because certain things aren't in place, making things happen to try to get your feet wet and just try to learn. And there's so much things you can do. Like, I wish I would have started that process earlier, and which is great, because now I mentor a handful of kids that the Puget Sound that want to get into sports industry, and they range from freshmen to juniors. So, and I tell every conversation I've had with them is like, you're really, really ahead of the game. And this is really beneficial, because like, thinking about it now, I would have killed in 2009 to have someone who's done it, who went to the school I went to, who has an idea of like, if this is where you want to go, here are the things you should be doing. So I think the number one thing would have been starting earlier and kind of making a path for that, instead of kind of just waiting back and then kind of waiting until I was at a point where I was ready to do a summer internship.
That's great. Thanks for working with those students. How'd you get connected with them?
It's been, so I spoke at an event a while back, but then I've been working through the BLP with Alan Krause. I had him as a professor in marketing when I was in school, and then he reached out to me through that program. So we get together pre-COVID. We got together twice a year and kind of have a happy hour type setting. And then your mentors get to ask you questions in person. And I've had many conversations with those guys. And but no, it's really cool and awesome that UPS is doing that. And it's good for kids in college to hear from people that are out in the fields that they want to pursue.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's great. What, on the flip side of my last question, what is something that you worried about or were concerned about as an undergrad that you wish you wouldn't have worried about quite as much in hindsight?
That I wish I guess, I'm trying to think. I think I would have been, okay, here's one. I would have been less, I thought that I wanted, like I said, for a while, I thought I wanted to be on TV, right? And I was so worried about trying to get an internship at whether it was Cairo 7 or King 5 or Q13 Fox or Como. And then when I didn't get any one of those, initially, it's funny, obviously, for my career path is now. I worked before then. I didn't really think about radio at all in that realm. So then I was like, okay. And then I was like, well, might as well apply to all these other places. And that's how I got my career started. And that springboarded all these opportunities. So I guess in hindsight, I would have worried less about not getting the exact specific internship that I thought I wanted, because honestly, at 20, I didn't know what the hell I wanted. I thought that I knew what I wanted, but I hadn't done anything in the field to really know. So I think I would have worried about that less and been less picky, instead of just understanding how connected all these industries are, whether it's radio, TV, digital, social media, or how connected everything is, that like take whatever opportunity you can get, learn as much as you can from that opportunity, and apply that to whatever your next thing is.
Cool. That's great advice. Well, Ness, I've got another question while we're potentially waiting for other questions. Similar to the advice question, what I would say, being specific, what are some tips that you have for people that are preparing to apply for jobs for in the kind of realm that you've worked in? Maybe what are some specific application tips that you might have, whether it's about resumes or cover letters or networking? I know you've touched on a lot of that, but what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, when it comes to a resume, you want yourself and where you're at to jump off the page, right? So I think some of the catch-22 about when you're trying to get your first gig, your work experience for the most part probably doesn't specifically apply to where you want to start, right? So like when I was starting, I guess it kind of helped that I worked in the athletic office, so that actually did apply. But like I worked at Safeway, and I worked at Champ Sports, and I was a student. So like that specific experience didn't necessarily apply to where you want to go. But I think it's really important to have a strong cover letter and to try to, in the most succinct way possible, talk about yourself, what you want to do and why you want to do it. I think a good thing for people to know is that like a lot of times people don't want to hear like for me, for example, I knew I wanted to work in sports, didn't necessarily know exactly where I wanted to end up, which is great. But you should have some interest in some field, because I think a not good thing to say when you're in an interview like that, or you're looking for one, it's like, hey, I just want to work in sports. I don't really care now, you might feel that way, like you want it, but you're not exactly sure. But you should narrow down some interests in whatever it is, whatever resume or cover letter you turn in. It needs to be tailored to that job. Do your research. Everyone has Google. Like look people up, the people you're submitting to. If you do get an interview, look them up on LinkedIn. Do your research about that, and do know what the job's going to entail, and just show that you've put in the work to understand what you're applying for and what you want to do. Because there's nothing worse than getting to that point and then just clearly when they ask you questions that you don't know about said organization, you don't know, like you should, wherever you're applying to, I mean, this can apply to anything, not just sports, but you should know, like if I'm applying for an internship for the Mariners or the Seahawks, I should know about that organization. I should know, I don't even know everything. I should have an idea what's going on. I should know their coach. I should know some of the players, coaching staff, things that they've done. Just do your homework. And I think, and if you do get to that point where you're getting an interview, I think here's another one. You need to have questions. At the end of most interviews, when it's wrapped up and they say, hey, do you have any questions for us? If you don't have any questions, that is a really bad look. And again, it speaks to like, you should have some questions, whether it came from the interview or something, because you've done research about the organization, because it needs to be a fit for you as much as it is for the company hiring you, right? Because if it's not a fit for you, then you shouldn't be applying for a job that you're either going to hate or you're not going to be a fit. So like asking questions shows that you put in research and you put in the time. So I think to circle back, it starts with a strong cover letter tailored to the position that you want, that you're applying for. Doing your research and putting what you have, I think, and then harping, because like if you don't know what you don't know as a student, so yeah, it's okay to in your resume, like, I'm a student, this is what I'm doing. I'm in the BLP program, or I'm in this and that. I'm in communications, but I'm eagerly trying to get my foot in the door for whatever position. So starting with a strong resume and cover letter. And then if you're fortunate enough to, you send your applications in, if you're fortunate enough to get a call back, do your research on whatever company or organization that you are applying towards to really show people that you're prepared and this is something that you want.
Well, that's good. I'll use that segue to plug that Current Employment Services is here to help you with that resume and cover letter, talk through all that stuff. Everything you said, NASA, is really consistent with what we talk about, and yeah, doing your research. And I found that, the more you learn about something, the more you research it, the more questions you have about it. So that's really where a lot of that sentiment comes. It's clear that you've done your research if you have questions. NASA, what was it like? What was your thought process as you shifted from your hometown? Since you mentioned before the interview that you grew up in this area, so you were interning at places in Seattle, working for franchises in Seattle, and then you go to Houston. I know it's common for people who want to work in sports to just go wherever the job is. So what was your personal experience in making that choice to go somewhere else, to search for employment elsewhere? What did that look like?
Yeah. So the thing about, like, you just you touched on it. More often than, if you work in sports, and this is the career you're pursuing and you read about it, you're probably going to have to move. You're going to have to relocate. And there's just not organizations, not in a lot of cases for you to stay in one place your whole career, because sometimes it takes leaving and coming back, like my situation, for you to get the job that you wanted. But it's just a part of the gig. Like, and I knew that. And so like when I was looking for jobs, I was applying to jobs all over the country. I was applying for different positions all over. I was in the running for a job at the University of Kentucky, Portland State University, Root Sport. There's all these different places at Pepperdine University. There's different teams that I was really looking into, and I knew that coming in, and everyone told me that, like, you're probably gonna have to move. That's part of the gig. And I guess knowing and then actually doing are two separate things. So like when the Astros thing came up and it was a really good opportunity, I knew no one in the state of Texas, no family there whatsoever. So when I went through that interview process, and it was kind of a crazy whirlwind, and I got a job offer, and I was going to have to leave and pack up and leave in 13 days and find a place to live and figure out how to ship my car down there. And it was a pretty wild experience. And then again, going where you don't know anybody and you're just trying to get your feet wet. So it was crazy, but it was a really, really, really good experience. Like I think that was really important in my growth, because it was 100% outside of my comfort zone. Like I said, I didn't know anybody, trying to figure out a completely new organization, because just because you did things the way you did for your organization previously does not mean that's how it's going to be over there. So I grew up a lot, and I was only there for a short term. I was only there for 6 months, and it kind of, that whole experience was such a whirlwind, but it was really good for me. Like I said, I learned a lot. I worked with some really good people. And the heat was a little much for a guy from Seattle. So I don't miss that whatsoever. But no, it was good. And I think, doing that, and then when the Seahawks called and I was like, hey, this opportunity came back, it was an unbelievable kind of like story out of a movie, because that's the other thing in sports. If you move for the job, you never know if you're going to get to come home like that. A lot of people, they're from wherever, but like you never get the opportunity to move back. And not only did I get the opportunity to move back within 6 months, I got the opportunity to work for a franchise that I've rooted for my entire life previous to that. So it was definitely kind of a storybook situation for me. But I wholeheartedly believe if I didn't leave to Houston and do what I did and do good work there, I don't think the opportunity would have arisen for me now. So I think it all happened for a reason, but it's something that if you want to do this, people should really accept and know. And if you have a significant other or whatever it is, like this should be in the back of your mind that like some people get lucky, some people never have to. But just knowing that you might have to relocate and for that opportunity and may never come back. Sometimes you do, sometimes it works out, but just know it's going to happen. But it was crazy, but I really enjoyed the experience.
Cool. Another question about working in the sports field that you just started to segue to is how do people in your field separate being a fan from doing their job?
It's it's easier than you'd think. I mean, like I said, a lot of people, once you begin working for a team, whether you grew up rooting for them or not, like your allegiances kind of go there, because if you're doing your job to your best of your ability, it starts with what's happening on the field, and then that goes throughout the rest of the organization. So everyone's main goal is to win the championship in whatever sport you're working in. And then a lot of times, people aren't from that city, so the rooting interest is a little different. But it was actually harder for me when I started because I was working for the Mariners, again, the team that I grew up rooting for my entire life, and like having moments where like Ken Griffey Jr. was getting inducted into the Mariners Hall of Fame and being around all of my childhood heroes that 8, 9, 10-year-old me would lose their mind or being in the same room as Ken Griffey Jr. But you figure it out. If this is what you want to do, you have to be professional. So that's probably the one fanboy moment that I had where I really had to check myself and be like, okay, you're at work, like keep it all inside. But you realize right away, if you want to stay in this industry, in this job, you need to be professional at all times. If you're working with athletes, players, they need to know that you have their best interest in mind at all times and that you're going to act in a professional way. So it's easier than you think. I mean, you'll have occasionally those moments, but if you want to stick around, you better make that flip over. And then the longer you're in it, outside of game day, you understand the business side of it and the importance of it. So it'll work itself out. In the short answer, it'll happen quick. You might have some of your moments early on, and then someone might pull you aside and be like, hey, get it together. That's not how we do things here. But no, it's a lot of it's internal strife, I guess, if you will, is like being in the moment and being like, I can't believe I'm here. I'm on the field pregame, and like this is a place I've always wanted to be. So that part was hard and early on, but like I said, the longer you're in it, it's really easy to draw that line of professionalism versus fandom.
Cool. Yeah, that's a good perspective. I think it's something that everyone going into sports should think about. This is coming from someone who loves sports and thought, like, what's my way in? And, for a variety of reasons, I went down a different path. But I always think back to, like, would I like working for a team that I'm not rooting for? Or would I still, enjoy sports if it was my job? Like, if that was the thing. I think that people that really weave those interests together seem to really enjoy it and love the field. So it's cool.
Yeah, I mean, all sports are a grind. Whether it's working in base, and I've had the opportunity to work in different sports. Every sport's a grind, and if you don't really love the sport and what you're doing, it'll be harder for you, especially if you're in a position that's around the athletes and the team, and living and dying on the success that happens there. It'd be hard because, like I said, especially when you start, you don't decide you want to work in sports because all you're thinking about is a huge payday. You know what I mean? You can sure as hell get there and get that, but it's not going to happen at the beginning. And you get in because you love being around it. So it's and for some people, it's different for everybody. For some people, they realize that they can get out, and that's just, they like to keep it separate. But I think the majority of people that dedicate their lives to working for a professional sports team or media outlet or whatever, they love being around whatever games they're covering so much that it's going to work turns into a blessing more than like I'm waiting for another day at work.
That's good perspective. Well, thanks for joining me, Nasser. I'll end our recorded portion, and if you're willing to hang out for a few minutes, we can chat informally with the people that have joined us.
Sure.
But yeah, I'll thanks for joining us. Thanks for watching. Those that are watching, for more information about how CES can support your career development, whether it's looking at that resume or cover letter for the application, or talking about ways to network and maybe meet people that work in this field, you can visit pugetsound.edu/CES and schedule an appointment with a career advisor like me. I love talking about people who want to go into this field. So it's add an extra plug. Talk to me if you want to talk about this, because I'll get excited about it right alongside with you. So thanks for joining us, Nasser. Thanks for everyone who's watching.
No problem.